What if everything you were taught about ancient technology is wrong? Scattered across the world are machines that should not exist, stones too heavy to move, and structures so precise they still challenge modern engineers. From a mysterious gear-driven device pulled from a Greek shipwreck to megaliths weighing hundreds of tons placed with razor-thin accuracy, history is filled with engineering feats we still struggle to explain. These are not myths. They are real discoveries, measured, dated, and debated by science itself. So how did ancient civilizations, without steel, engines, or modern mathematics, build technologies that seem far ahead of their time? And more unsettling still, why did this knowledge disappear? Tonight, we journey into the lost science of the ancient world, where progress was fragile, brilliance was forgotten, and history may have erased more than it preserved. Stay with us, because once you see what our ancestors achieved, you may never look at the past the same way again. Like, share, and subscribe to Mysteries of Earth, because the truth is older than history itself. At the dawn of the 20th century, off the rugged coast of a small Greek island called Antikythera, sponge divers descended into the dark Mediterranean waters, expecting nothing more than the quiet harvest of the sea. What they found instead was a graveyard of history, a Roman-era shipwreck scattered across the ocean floor, frozen in time for nearly 2,000 years. Bronze statues lay twisted beneath layers of sediment. Amphorae rested where they had fallen. It was a familiar kind of discovery, until something unfamiliar emerged from the wreckage. Among the corroded relics was a lump of bronze and wood, fractured, green with age, and seemingly unremarkable. It was catalogued, stored, and largely forgotten. At first glance, it looked like debris, another casualty of time and salt water. No one suspected that inside this broken mass lay a machine that would quietly challenge everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. Years later, as conservators began carefully cleaning the artifacts, something strange appeared. Tiny bronze gears, interlocking teeth, mechanical precision hidden beneath centuries of corrosion. This was not decoration. This was not art. This was engineering. As scientists examined the fragments more closely, disbelief set in. The object was not random. It was designed, purposeful, complex. Dozens of gears meshed together in a way no one expected from the ancient world. X-ray imaging revealed layered mechanisms, rotating components, and inscriptions etched so finely they were nearly invisible to the naked eye. The deeper researchers looked, the stranger it became. This was not supposed to exist. The artifact came to be known as the Antikythera Mechanism, and its implications were unsettling. At a time when history books described ancient technology as simple and limited, this machine suggested something else entirely, a level of mechanical soapy. Histication thought to belong to a much later age. It hinted at precision engineering, mathematical understanding, and astronomical knowledge far beyond what mainstream timelines allowed. For modern scientists, the shock was not just in what the device did, but in when it was made. This was not a medieval invention, not a Renaissance breakthrough. It was ancient, built more than 2,000 years ago. And yet, nothing like it would appear again for over a millennium. The discovery raised an uncomfortable question. If such a machine could exist, what else had been lost? History often presents progress as a straight line, slow, steady, predictable. But the Antikythera Mechanism suggested a different story, one where knowledge could rise, vanish, and be buried beneath the waves. One where advanced ideas did not always survive the civilizations that created them. In the quiet depths of Antikythera, history had not just been preserved, it had been hidden. And when that machine emerged from the sea, it felt less like a discovery and more like a revelation, one that hinted humanity's past might be far more complex and far more fragile than we ever imagined. When scientists finally began to understand what the Antikythera Mechanism was designed to do, the discovery grew even more unsettling. This was not merely a collection of gears. It was a system, a machine built to model the cosmos itself. Encased within its corroded bronze frame was a precise mechanical language, one that translated the movements of the heavens into turning wheels and measured cycles. At its core, the mechanism was driven by gears cut with astonishing accuracy. Each tooth was shaped to mesh flawlessly with the next, forming ratios that mirrored celestial rhythms. These were not decorative elements or crude approximations. They were mathematical expressions carved in metal. When turned, the gears could predict eclipses, track lunar phases, and follow the paths of known planets. Time, space, and motion were compressed into a device small enough to be carried by hand. Modern analysis revealed that the mechanism operated as an analog computer, arguably the first ever discovered. It took complex astronomical knowledge and converted it into mechanical motion, allowing its user to forecast future events based on past cycles. This concept alone would be revolutionary centuries later. Yet here it was, emerging from the ancient world, long before the scientific frameworks we associate with such precision were thought to exist. What makes this discovery truly extraordinary is not just its function, but its level of refinement. The gears were arranged in layered assemblies, some hidden behind others, working together in synchronized harmony. Differential gearing, once believed to be a modern invention, was present in its design. This implied an understanding of mechanical principles that would not formally reappear until the development of advanced clocks in medieval Europe. Even more astonishing was the astronomical accuracy encoded into the machine, the Antikythera Mechanism accounted for irregular lunar motion, a problem that challenged astronomers for centuries. It incorporated cycles known only through advanced observation and long-term data collection. This was not knowledge gained overnight. It was the result of generations of careful study, preserved not in books, but in bronze. For historians, this posed a profound problem. According to conventional timelines, such technological sophistication should not exist in this era. The ancient world, we are told, lacked the tools, the mathematics, and the infrastructure to create such devices. And yet, the evidence was turning in their hands. The mechanism forced a re-evaluation of ancient intelligence, not as primitive, but as precise. Not as experimental, but as confident. It suggested that somewhere in the ancient world, engineers and astronomers had reached a level of understanding we had never fully acknowledged. And perhaps most haunting of all is this thought. If this machine survived only by chance, hidden in a shipwreck beneath the sea, how many others were lost forever? How many breakthroughs vanished with the civilizations that built them? The Antikythera Mechanism stands as a quiet reminder that progress is not always forward, and that the ancient world may have known far more than history has allowed us to remember. The Antikythera Mechanism was not an isolated miracle. Once its existence was accepted, historians were forced to look again at the ancient world with new eyes, and what they began to notice was unsettling. Scattered across time and geography were hints of a deeper mechanical tradition, one that once flourished, then quietly disappeared. In ancient Greece, engineers like Hero of Alexandria described devices that seem almost impossible for their age. Doors that opened by themselves, statues that poured wine, machines powered not by magic, but by air pressure, steam, and carefully balanced weights. These were automata, early self-operating machines designed for temples and theaters. To later generations, they appeared as curiosities or illusions. But behind the spectacle was real engineering knowledge, carefully applied and precisely controlled. Water clocks offer another clue. Long before mechanical clocks existed, ancient civilizations were measuring time with remarkable accuracy. In Greece, complex clepsydrae regulated court proceedings and astronomical observations. In China, towering water clocks used gears, flowing water, and escapement-like mechanisms to track hours, days, and even seasons. These were not simple bowls with holes. They were engineered systems, requiring mathematical planning and long-term calibration. Across the Islamic world, scholars preserved and expanded this knowledge. During Europe's early medieval period, engineers such as the Banu Musa brothers, and Al-Jazari documented intricate machines, programmable musical automata, water-powered clocks, and mechanical servants. Their designs revealed an understanding of cams, crankshafts, valves, and feedback systems, centuries before these concepts were formally defined in modern engineering. Yet here lies the mystery. These technologies did not lead directly to an industrial age. Instead, they faded. War destroyed workshops, libraries burned, empires collapsed. Knowledge that was once passed from master to apprentice was broken into fragments. Mechanical understanding survived only in scattered texts, misunderstood drawings, and isolated inventions. Without continuity, even the most advanced ideas can vanish. What remains today are echoes, machines described but not built, diagrams without instructions, devices discovered without context. The Antikythera Mechanism fits this pattern perfectly, a masterpiece with no known ancestors and no direct descendants. It appears suddenly, fully formed, then disappears from the historical record. This suggests that ancient engineering was not a straight path of progress, but a fragile chain. When that chain broke, knowledge did not slowly decline. It collapsed. Skills were lost, techniques forgotten, entire traditions erased by time, conflict, and neglect. The forgotten machines of the ancient world remind us of something uncomfortable. Intelligence is not new. Innovation is not guaranteed to survive. And history as we know it may only preserve what managed to endure, not what once existed. Beneath the ruins and rusted gears lies a sobering possibility, that humanity has reinvented itself more than once, rebuilding knowledge that had already been discovered and then lost. When we admire the great inventions of history, we often search for names, geniuses to credit, minds to celebrate, individuals who changed the world. Yet when it comes to the most mysterious machines of the ancient past, we find something unsettling. Silence. No signatures carved into bronze, no biographies preserved in ink. Only the machines themselves, standing as mute witnesses to minds we can no longer identify. The Antikythera Mechanism offers no clue to its maker, no name, no workshop, no surviving manual. It emerges from history fully formed, astonishingly complex, and entirely anonymous. This absence is not unique. Across the ancient world, advanced devices appear without clear authorship, as if the knowledge that created them belonged not to individuals, but to systems, traditions passed down, refined, and guarded over generations. In many ancient societies, engineers were not celebrated as innovators. They were artisans, temple technicians, court scholars, often working in secrecy or under patronage. Their knowledge was practical, not philosophical, and therefore rarely recorded by historians who favored kings, wars, and ideas over mechanisms and tools. What they built mattered. Who built it often did not. When those systems collapsed, the knowledge vanished with them. Libraries burned in Alexandria, Baghdad, Nalanda, and countless other centers of learning. Invasions shattered institutions. Economic collapse dismantled workshops. Apprentices lost their teachers. Without written transmission or stable continuity, complex engineering traditions simply stopped being taught. And when a generation forgets how something is made, that knowledge does not fade slowly. It disappears. The silence in the historical record is misleading. It gives the impression that advanced machines were rare accidents or isolated anomalies. But silence does not mean absence. It often means loss. The ancient world relied heavily on oral instruction, hands-on training, and experiential learning, methods that leave little trace once broken. This creates a troubling illusion. We assume that because we cannot see the builders, they must not have existed. But machines like the Antikythera Mechanism, intricate automata, and precision stonework suggest organized communities of specialists, people who understood mathematics, astronomy, materials, and motion at a high level. They were engineers without monuments, scientists without textbooks, innovators erased not by failure, but by time. In the end, the question is not why we don't know their names. The real question is how much knowledge can vanish without us ever realizing it was there. History records survival, not brilliance. And the machines left behind whisper a quiet truth, that entire worlds of understanding can exist, flourish, and disappear, leaving only questions behind. History is often taught as a straight upward line, a steady march from simplicity to sophistication, from crude tools to complex machines. According to this story, each generation builds neatly upon the last. But every so often, an artifact appears that refuses to fit, a machine that seems to arrive too early, a level of precision that belongs to another age. And when that happens, the timeline begins to bend. Ancient mechanical devices like the Antikythera Mechanism pose exactly this problem. Their complexity does not align with what our historical models predict for their era. According to conventional timelines, such technology should not exist yet. The mathematics should be incomplete, the tools insufficient, the scientific framework missing. And yet, the machine works perfectly. This creates an uncomfortable tension between evidence and expectation. Archaeological timelines are built by patterns, what usually appears before or after something else. Simple tools precede complex ones. Manual labor precedes automation. But advanced ancient machines break these patterns. They appear suddenly, without a clear evolutionary trail, and then disappear just as abruptly. Modern engineering depends on accumulated knowledge, textbooks, standardized measurements, mass production. Ancient engineers worked differently. Their understanding was practical, embodied in experience rather than theory. They learned by building, observing, and refining. When such knowledge is lost, it leaves little trace for historians to follow. No drafts, no revisions, just the final product. This is why advanced ancient mechanics feel like anomalies. They survive as finished achievements without their developmental history, and without that context, they appear impossible. Yet nature itself does not move in straight lines. Neither does human progress. Civilizations rise, stabilize, and fall. Knowledge can stagnate, surge, or vanish entirely depending on stability, resources, and continuity. In such a world, technological peaks can occur and then be erased. The mystery is not that ancient people were capable of brilliance. It is that we assumed they were not. Advanced mechanics in the ancient world challenge a deep bias, that intelligence and innovation belong primarily to the modern age. But precision gears, astronomical modeling, and mechanical automation do not require electricity or computers, only observation, patience, and understanding. What unsettles historians most is not just that these machines existed, but that they were likely part of a broader tradition now lost. The surviving examples may be rare, not because they were unique, but because they were fragile. Made of wood, bronze, and knowledge itself. Materials that do not survive catastrophe. Technology before its time forces us to ask a different question. Not, how could they build this? But, what assumptions are we making about the past? Because if our timelines cannot account for what we can physically hold in our hands, then perhaps the problem is not the machines, but the story we tell about human progress. Across the ancient world, there are stones that seem almost defiant in their existence, not because they stand tall or endure through time, but because by every conventional measure they should never have been moved at all. These are megaliths weighing tens, sometimes hundreds of tons, positioned with a precision that challenges even modern engineering. In Lebanon, the ancient temple complex of Baalbek rests upon stone blocks so massive they stretch the limits of belief. Some weigh over 800 tons, cut, transported, and placed with astonishing accuracy. In Peru, the walls of Sacsayhuaman are built from stones fitted so tightly that a blade cannot pass between them, each block irregular, yet perfectly interlocked. In Egypt, single granite slabs weighing hundreds of tons were quarried and moved across vast distances long before the invention of cranes or steel tools. According to conventional explanations, these stones were dragged with ropes, rolled on logs, and lifted with sheer manpower. And while such methods may explain smaller stones, they begin to collapse under the weight of the largest examples. The physics becomes unforgiving. Friction increases, materials fail, human strength reaches its limits, and yet the stones are there. What makes the mystery deeper is not just their size, but their placement. Many were lifted into elevated positions, aligned with astonishing accuracy, and integrated into structures that required careful planning. These were not chaotic piles of rock. They were deliberate, engineered constructions. Ancient builders worked without cranes, without steel, without engines. No pulleys capable of handling such loads have survived. No written records explain the process. We are left with finished monuments and unanswered questions. Some researchers suggest lost techniques, methods involving counterweights, earth ramps, or unknown lifting strategies, so refined over generations. Others argue that our understanding of ancient logistics is incomplete, that these societies possessed organizational skills and practical engineering knowledge far beyond what we credit them with. What is certain is this: moving stones of this scale is not accidental. It requires planning, coordination, and deep understanding of materials and force. These builders were not guessing. They were solving problems. And perhaps the greatest illusion is assuming that because ancient tools were simple, ancient minds were limited. Precision does not demand modern technology. It demands knowledge, knowledge that can be gained, refined, and tragically lost. The stones remain unmoved by our doubts, silent but undeniable. They stand as physical evidence that the ancient world achieved feats we still struggle to explain. And until we fully understand how they were moved, one truth remains clear. History has underestimated the engineers who shaped the world with nothing but stone, skill, and knowledge that time has nearly erased. When standing before the great stone monuments of the ancient world, the first reaction is often awe. The second is confusion, because size alone does not explain what we see. Precision does. Across continents and cultures, ancient structures display stonework so exact that it challenges the limits of what we believe was possible with primitive tools. Blocks cut at precise angles, surfaces flattened to near perfection, joints so tight that even a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. These are not the marks of rough labor. They are the fingerprints of mastery. In Peru, the walls of Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman are assembled from massive stones, each uniquely shaped, yet fitted together with extraordinary accuracy. There is no mortar, no filler. Each stone locks into the next as if molded in place. In Egypt, granite blocks, harder than steel tools available at the time, were cut with flat faces and sharp corners that remain true after thousands of years. In India, temples carved from single blocks of stone show symmetry and finish that would challenge modern workshops. According to traditional explanations, these feats were accomplished with simple tools: copper chisels, stone hammers, and sand for abrasion. But experimental archaeology has shown how slow and limited these methods are when applied to hard stone. The question is not whether ancient builders could cut stone, but how they achieved such consistency, accuracy, and scale. Razor-thin tolerances imply planning, measurement, repetition. They suggest the use of templates, advanced surveying, and a deep understanding of geometry. Many structures align perfectly with cardinal directions or celestial events, requiring precise calculations and long-term observation. This level of craftsmanship is not accidental. It is the result of systems, training methods passed down, techniques refined over centuries, and standards that had to be maintained. And yet few written records explain how this was done. The tools are gone, the instructions lost. What remains is stone that refuses to erode our doubts. Modern engineers, when asked how such precision was achieved, often pause. Not because it is impossible, but because it does not fit the story we tell about technological development. We assume refinement comes late. That accuracy requires machines. That perfection is modern. But stone does not lie. The ancient world may have approached engineering differently, not through speed or automation, but through patience and mastery. Techniques optimized for hand labor, guided by knowledge rather than power. Precision beyond primitive tools forces us to reconsider what primitive really means. Because when joints still hold after earthquakes, when cuts remain true after millennia, and when tolerances rival modern standards, the evidence suggests that ancient builders were not merely capable. They were exact. Across the world, separated by oceans and millennia, ancient stone structures share something deeply unsettling. They look as if they belong to the same conversation. Massive blocks fitted with near-perfect precision, polygonal masonry, cyclopean walls, techniques so similar that they seem to echo one another across continents where, according to conventional history, no contact should have existed. In South America, the stonework of the Inca and their predecessors shows tightly interlocked blocks, irregular in shape yet flawlessly joined. In Egypt, massive limestone and granite blocks were laid with astonishing accuracy, some weighing dozens of tons. In Japan, enormous stone foundations appear carved and assembled with comparable techniques. Even in ancient Greece, certain walls reveal polygonal masonry, strikingly reminiscent of those found half a world away. The question is unavoidable: coincidence or connection? One explanation is independent genius. Human beings, faced with similar challenges, may naturally arrive at similar solutions. Stone is abundant. Gravity is universal. Precision increases stability. Perhaps these cultures simply learned, through trial and error, that certain methods worked best. But this explanation begins to strain when similarities extend beyond function into style. The same types of joints, the same attention to tolerances, the same apparent preference for massive stones over smaller, more manageable ones. These choices were not necessary, but they were repeated. If knowledge was shared, how did it travel? Official history offers no clear answer. There are no maps charting ancient global exchanges of engineering wisdom, no written accounts of master builders crossing oceans. Yet stone remains, indifferent to the absence of explanation. Some researchers suggest that these techniques originated from earlier civilizations, long gone, whose knowledge spread before being erased by time. Others argue that trade routes were more extensive than we currently acknowledge, allowing ideas, not armies, to move across the ancient world. What makes this mystery so compelling is not just the similarity of construction, but the similarity of intent. These structures were meant to endure, built not for convenience but for permanence. They were statements carved into the landscape, designed to resist earthquakes, erosion, and time itself. And they succeeded. The global presence of megalithic architecture challenges the idea that ancient societies were isolated experiments. Instead, it hints at a deeper story, one of shared principles, lost exchanges, or perhaps forgotten chapters of human movement and learning. Whether these similarities arose independently or through shared knowledge, one truth remains: ancient builders across the world reached comparable heights of engineering excellence without modern technology. The stones do not tell us how the knowledge traveled. They only tell us that it existed, and that humanity, long before the modern age, was capable of remarkable coordinated brilliance. To understand the achievements of the ancient world, one must first remove the tools we take for granted. No cranes towering above construction sites, no steel beams, no engines to multiply force, no electricity to power precision. And yet, civilizations long ago raised monuments that still dominate landscapes today. structures whose construction would challenge even modern crews. Ancient builders worked with stone, wood, rope, and human coordination. Their machines, if they can be called that, were simple in appearance: levers, sledges, ramps, counterweights. But simplicity does not mean weakness. When applied with knowledge and planning, these tools became powerful extensions of human understanding. Ramps may explain how stones were raised, but they do not explain how precision was maintained. Counterweights can lift, but only if perfectly calculated. Moving stones weighing hundreds of tons requires more than strength. It requires foresight, geometry, and disciplined coordination across large groups of people. Every mistake compounds. Every miscalculation risks collapse. Modern explanations often focus on individual techniques, isolating one method at a time. Logs here, ramps there. But ancient construction was not a single trick. It was a system, a choreography of labor, timing, and design, refined through experience rather than written theory. What complicates the picture further is the lack of direct evidence. The organic materials used, wood, rope, scaffolding, have long since decayed. What remains are only the stones, stripped of the processes that placed them. This absence creates the illusion that something impossible occurred, when in reality something deeply knowledgeable did. And yet there are limits to our reconstructions. Experiments attempting to replicate ancient building techniques often succeed on small scales, but struggle when pushed to full size. The energy required becomes enormous, the margin for error vanishes, and questions return. How were stones lifted with such control? How were they set so precisely? How were large teams organized without modern communication? These are not trivial challenges. They are engineering problems of the highest order. Perhaps ancient builders possessed techniques we have not yet rediscovered, or perhaps their advantage lay not in hidden technology, but in something modern society rarely values: time. They built slowly, carefully, across generations if necessary. Precision was not rushed. Engineering without machines reminds us that technology is not just hardware. It is knowledge applied through human systems. And the ancient world, far from being technologically naive, may have mastered a form of engineering we are only beginning to understand again. Their monuments stand not as accidents of brute force, but as deliberate achievements of intellect, proof that machines are not the only path to mastery. For centuries, the great stone monuments of the world have stood in silence, while generations of scholars have argued at their feet. How were they built? With what knowledge? And why does no single explanation seem complete? Despite modern technology and advanced analysis, the secrets of the stone builders remain stubbornly out of reach. Archaeology offers theories, not conclusions. Ramps, levers, counterweights, and coordinated labor form the foundation of most explanations. In isolation, each method seems reasonable, but when applied to the largest megaliths, stones weighing hundreds of tons placed with millimeter precision, these theories begin to strain. The scale becomes immense, the logistics overwhelming, and the margin for error nearly non-existent. Some researchers propose lost techniques, methods refined over centuries, passed orally and never written down. Others suggest advanced surveying skills using sightlines, plumb bobs, and celestial alignment to achieve accuracy without modern instruments. There are hypotheses involving water transport, earth embankments, and carefully timed construction phases spanning generations. Then there are more controversial ideas: acoustic stone shaping, chemical softening of rock, advanced lifting devices now lost to time. While many of these remain speculative, they persist because conventional explanations leave gaps. Science does not embrace these ideas lightly, but neither can it ignore unanswered questions. What makes the debate so enduring is the evidence itself. The stones are real, the precision is measurable, the placements are deliberate. These are not myths or legends, they are physical facts. And yet, the processes behind them remain incomplete in our understanding. Modern science thrives on reproducibility. If something can be done, it should be repeatable. But when modern experiments attempt to replicate ancient science into feats at full scale, they often fall short, not because the past was magical, but because we lack the same conditions: time, labor, continuity, cultural focus. Ancient builders were not constrained by deadlines or cost efficiency. They were building for eternity. Their priorities were different, their knowledge embedded in practice rather than documentation. This is why debate continues, not because science has failed, but because it remains honest. It admits uncertainty. It recognizes that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The stone builder's secret may never be fully recovered, but each unanswered question brings us closer to a deeper truth. The ancient world was not a crude beginning. It was a sophisticated chapter, partially erased. And until we can explain every stone, every cut, every placement, the monuments will continue to ask us a quiet, unsettling question. How much have we forgotten? Along the coasts of the Mediterranean, Roman harbors still stand where waves have battered them for nearly 2,000 years. Temples remain upright. Domes remain uncracked. Roads still trace the empire's vanished borders. In a world where modern concrete often crumbles within decades, these ancient structures pose an uncomfortable question. Why has Roman concrete endured where ours fails? For centuries, the answer seemed simple: luck, thickness, or climate. But as modern buildings began to deteriorate faster than expected, researchers started looking closer. What they found was not coincidence, but chemistry. Roman concrete was not made like modern concrete. It relied on a unique mixture of lime, volcanic ash known as pozzolana, and seawater. This combination triggered chemical reactions that continued long after the concrete had hardened. Instead of weakening over time, the material evolved, growing stronger as centuries passed. Microscopic analysis has revealed something extraordinary. When cracks form in Roman concrete, seawater infiltrates the material and reacts with volcanic minerals, creating new crystalline structures. These crystals, such as aluminous tobermorite, grow inside the cracks, effectively sealing them. The concrete heals itself, silently repairing damage that would destroy modern structures. Modern concrete, by contrast, is designed for speed and efficiency. Steel reinforcement corrodes, microcracks spread, water penetrates. Failure is inevitable. Roman builders, however, were not building for quarterly profits or short lifespans. They were building for permanence. What makes this even more remarkable is that Roman engineers likely did not understand the chemistry in modern terms. They worked through observation, experimentation, and tradition. Over generations, they refined a formula that harnessed natural geological processes, turning volcanic instability into architectural immortality. The Pantheon's dome remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Roman piers still stand submerged in salt water, a condition that destroys modern concrete rapidly. These are not anomalies. They are the result of intentional design. Today, scientists are racing to reverse engineer the formula. Laboratories attempt to recreate Roman concrete using ancient recipes, modern analysis, and trial after trial. Progress has been made, but full replication remains elusive. Subtle variations in ash composition, firing temperatures, and mixing techniques matter more than once believed. The Romans left instructions, but not explanations. The knowledge was practical, not theoretical, and when the empire fell, so did the continuity of that expertise. Roman concrete is a reminder that technological progress is not a straight line. Sometimes knowledge is lost, not because it was inferior, but because the systems that sustained it disappeared. The secret of Roman concrete is not just about materials, it is about mindset, about building with patience, humility, and respect for natural forces. And as modern cities rise and fall with alarming speed, the ancient walls still standing whisper a quiet warning. Durability is not always about innovation, it is about understanding what already works. On the edge of the desert, where the sands of Egypt stretch toward the horizon. 3 mountains of stone rise with a silence that feels deliberate. The pyramids of Giza are not merely ancient monuments. They are mathematical statements, etched into the earth with an accuracy that continues to unsettle modern engineers. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an error of less than a fraction of a degree. Even with today's satellite technology, achieving that level of precision across such a massive structure is difficult. Yet this alignment was accomplished over 4,000 years ago, without compasses, GPS, or modern surveying instruments. The question lingers, how? Each side of the Great Pyramid is almost perfectly equal in length. The base is level to within mere centimeters, across an area larger than several football fields. More than 2 million stone blocks, many weighing several tons, were placed with astonishing consistency. The gaps between them are so tight that even a razor blade struggles to slip between stones. This was not rough construction refined by erosion. It was precision by design. Engineers examining the structure today find something deeply uncomfortable in the numbers. The pyramid's dimensions encode mathematical relationships involving pi and the Earth's measurements. Whether intentional or coincidental, the geometry suggests a level of planning that extends far beyond stacking stones. Then there is the question of construction. No cranes, no steel tools, no engines. Conventional explanations propose ramps, straight, zigzagging, or internal, but each theory struggles under scrutiny. The volume of material required for ramps rivals the pyramid itself. The logistics become overwhelming, and yet the pyramid stands, silent and complete. Tool marks raise further questions. Granite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, was cut with a smoothness that challenges even modern machining. Copper tools, long assumed to be responsible, seem inadequate for the task. Something more sophisticated was at work, methods we do not fully understand, or have perhaps forgotten. What makes the pyramids truly unsettling is their consistency. These were not experimental structures. They were the culmination of knowledge already mastered. Mistakes are rare. Adjustments are minimal. This suggests a long tradition of engineering expertise, one that appears suddenly in the archaeological record, fully formed. The pyramids also align with the stars. Shafts point toward specific constellations. The complex reflects celestial cycles, linking stone, sky, and time into a single architectural expression. These were not tombs alone. They were instruments, measuring, aligning, and commemorating cosmic order. Modern engineers study the pyramids with a mixture of admiration and humility. Every answer uncovers deeper uncertainty. Every explanation leaves something unresolved. The pyramids do not defy science, but they expose its limits. They remind us that ancient civilizations were not primitive precursors stumbling toward progress. They were precise, deliberate, and capable of feats we are still struggling to explain. And as the sun sets behind Giza, casting long shadows across the plateau, one truth remains carved in stone. The past was far more advanced than we are comfortable admitting. Long before the roar of blast furnaces and the age of industrial steel, ancient civilizations were already shaping metals with a mastery that still unsettles modern science. Buried beneath layers of time lie blades that never rusted, columns that refused to decay, and alloys whose secrets vanished along with the cultures that forged them. One of the most striking mysteries is ancient steel, created centuries, sometimes millennia, before historians believed it possible. In India stands the Iron Pillar of Delhi, over 1,600 years old, exposed to monsoon rains and humid air, yet almost entirely free of corrosion. Modern metallurgists expected severe rust. Instead, they found a carefully engineered alloy and a protective chemical layer formed through precise control of materials. This was not accidental. It was knowledge applied with intention. Even more perplexing is Wootz steel, produced in ancient India and later transformed into the legendary Damascus steel. These blades were famed for their strength, flexibility, and distinctive flowing patterns, capable of slicing through armor while remaining razor-sharp. When modern scientists attempted to recreate them, many failed. The original process had been lost, preserved only in fragments of texts and microscopic clues locked inside surviving blades. Across the ancient world, similar anomalies appear. In Egypt, metal tools show signs of precision far beyond what soft copper should allow. In South America, pre-Columbian civilizations produced complex gold and copper alloys with exact melting points, colors, and strengths. Metallurgy tuned more like chemistry than craft. In China, cast iron was being produced over 2,000 years ago, centuries before Europe would master the same technique. These achievements challenge a core assumption of history, that ancient metalworking was crude, limited, and incremental. Instead, evidences. C suggests deep experimentation, empirical testing, and an understanding of heat, structure, and composition that rivals early modern science. What makes this knowledge even more mysterious is its disappearance. Metallurgy is not easily forgotten. It requires repetition, tradition, and skilled transmission. Yet entire techniques vanished. Recipes were lost. Workshops disappeared. The chain of learning broke. Wars destroyed cities. Empires collapsed. Trade routes closed. Libraries burned. And with them went the precise temperatures, mixtures and methods that once transformed raw ore into near miraculous materials. Modern laboratories now peer into ancient metals using electron microscopes and spectroscopy, discovering nanoscale structures embedded within blades and tools, features that seem astonishingly advanced, features no one expected to find. The question is no longer whether ancient civilizations understood metallurgy, but how much they truly knew. Were these isolated breakthroughs, or remnants of a wider global tradition of material science, now reduced to scattered artifacts? Ancient metallurgy reminds us that progress is not a straight line. Knowledge can rise, peak, and vanish, leaving behind silent objects that refuse to behave as history says they should. And in the cold gleam of an ancient blade, or the unyielding strength of a forgotten alloy, we glimpse a truth both humbling and unsettling. The past may have understood materials in ways we are only now beginning to rediscover. Long before drafting tables, computer models, and digital simulations, ancient builders raised monuments that still dominate landscapes and defy time. There were no blueprints unrolled on desks, no calculators to verify angles, no software to test stress and strain. And yet, stone by stone, entire worlds were measured, aligned, and brought into being with astonishing precision. How did they plan what they could not draw as we do today? Across ancient civilizations, knowledge was not stored on paper, but carried in memory, ritual, and practice. Geometry lived in rope and shadow. Measurements were held in the body, in the span of arms, the length of a stride, the rhythm of repeated actions. Egyptian builders used knotted cords to create perfect right angles. Surveyors read the movement of stars to align temples and pyramids with celestial north. These were not improvisations. They were systems, tested, refined, and trusted. Without written plans, construction became a living process. Master builders guided teams through oral instruction and demonstration. Each phase unfolded in sequence, with proportions embedded into the structure itself. The building was the blueprint. As walls rose, they revealed the next step, locking future stages into place with geometric certainty. In places like Machu Picchu, stones were shaped individually, each one fitted to its neighbor like a three-dimensional puzzle. There was no master diagram to reference, only an intimate understanding of form, pressure, and balance. In the pyramids of Egypt, millions of blocks were positioned with an accuracy that suggests long-term planning at a scale almost unimaginable, achieved without written architectural plans as we understand them. Modern engineers rely on abstraction, numbers detached from the physical world. Ancient engineers worked differently. Their mathematics was embodied. Ratios were experienced. Visually and spatially. Sacred geometry guided layouts, ensuring harmony between structure, landscape, and sky. In many cultures, Building was inseparable from cosmology. To construct was to align Earth with the heavens. This approach also allowed flexibility. Without rigid plans, builders adapted to stone quality, terrain, and unforeseen challenges. Knowledge flowed through generations of craftsmen, passed from master to apprentice, preserved not in ink, but in muscle memory and trained perception. Yet this system had a fragility modern ones do not. When civilizations collapsed, the knowledge vanished with the people who carried it. There were no manuals to recover, no diagrams to decode. Only finished monuments remained, perfect, silent, and resistant to explanation. Today, when engineers attempt to reconstruct ancient building methods, they often struggle, not because the ancients lacked intelligence, but because their way of thinking was fundamentally different. It was holistic rather than analytical, experiential rather than theoretical. Engineering without blueprints reveals a powerful truth. Complexity does not require modern tools. It requires understanding. And in the stones that still stand, we see evidence of a knowledge system so deeply internalized that it never needed to be written down, only remembered, practiced, and lived. History is often told as a straight line, simple tools evolving slowly into complex machines, ignorance giving way to understanding, progress marching forward one invention at a time. But scattered across the ancient world are moments that do not fit this narrative at all. Moments where knowledge appears suddenly, fully formed, and far ahead of the age in which it supposedly belonged. These are the technologies that shouldn't exist yet. The Antikythera Mechanism is one such moment, an intricate system of interlocking gears capable of predicting eclipses and planetary cycles, built nearly 2,000 years before the mechanical clocks of medieval Europe. Its precision suggests not a crude experiment, but the culmination of a long and sophisticated engineering tradition, one that leaves little trace before or after it. In Egypt, massive stone blocks were cut and aligned with tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. The Great Pyramid's orientation to true north is so precise that it rivals modern surveying equipment. Such accuracy implies an advanced understanding of geometry, astronomy, and measurement, knowledge that textbooks say should not appear for centuries. Elsewhere, Roman concrete challenges modern materials science. Some ancient harbor structures have grown stronger over time, thanks to chemical reactions that researchers only recently began to understand. The Romans may not have known the equations behind their success, but they understood the behavior of materials at a level that modern builders are still trying to replicate. Ancient metallurgy tells a similar story. High-carbon steel in India, flexible yet durable swords in the Middle East, corrosion-resistant alloys in South America. Each points to a deep, empirical understanding of heat, pressure, and molecular structure, achieved without microscopes or modern chemistry. What makes these examples so unsettling is not just their sophistication, but their isolation. They appear like technological islands, advanced knowledge rising briefly, then vanishing. There is no clear progression leading up to them, and no obvious continuation afterward. They disrupt the idea that progress is always cumulative and irreversible. This forces an uncomfortable question: what if human knowledge does not move forward in a straight line? Instead, history may be cyclical. Knowledge can emerge, flourish, and then be lost, erased by collapse, disaster, or neglect. When societies fall, libraries burn, specialists die, and techniques that took centuries to develop can disappear in a single generation. Modern civilization assumes permanence. We believe our technology will always advance, always be preserved. But the ancient world tells a different story, one where brilliance could exist without guaranteeing survival. These technologies that surpassed their era are not anomalies to be dismissed. They are signals, reminders that intelligence and innovation are not exclusive to the modern age, and that progress is far more fragile than we like to believe. In the ruins of ancient machines and impossible structures, we glimpse a deeper truth. Humanity has reached great heights before, and it may have forgotten them. There is a quiet tragedy woven through human history, not the fall of kings or the collapse of empires, but the slow, devastating disappearance of knowledge itself. Ideas painstakingly gathered over centuries can vanish in a single night. Entire civilizations can fade, not because they were insignificant, but because their words, records, and memories were erased. Across the ancient world, libraries once stood as monuments to human thought. They were not just collections of scrolls, but living centers of science, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. The Great Library of Alexandria is the most famous among them, a place said to contain the accumulated wisdom of the ancient world. Mathematics from Greece, medical texts from Egypt, astronomical records from Babylon. When it burned, knowledge was not simply lost. Humanity's understanding of itself was fractured. And Alexandria was not alone. In Central America, Maya codices recorded generations of astronomical observations, calendars, and history. When conquistadors arrived, most were destroyed, burned as heretical texts. Of thousands of books, only a handful survived. What we know of Maya science today comes from fragments, reconstructed from stone carvings and ruins, not from the voices of the people themselves. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets preserved law codes, engineering knowledge, and literature for millennia. Yet even these durable records were vulnerable, buried, broken, forgotten beneath the sands as cities fell and rivers shifted. Many remain untranslated, their meanings still locked away. Knowledge does not vanish only through fire. Sometimes it is lost through neglect. Oral traditions break when elders die. Specialized crafts disappear when apprentices are gone. Languages fade, taking with them entire ways of thinking. When a civilization collapses, survival comes first. Memory comes later, if at all. What is most unsettling is how complete this erasure can be. Archaeologists uncover cities without names, technologies without explanations, structures without written records. We are left with stones but no instructions, machines but no manuals, achievements without authors. History, as we know it, is shaped by what survived, not by what existed. This means our picture of the past is deeply incomplete. For every idea preserved, countless others are gone forever. For every text we study, thousands were never copied, never saved, never remembered. Modern society often assumes that information is permanent, that data stored, digitized, and shared cannot truly be lost. But the ancient world offers a warning. Knowledge is fragile. It depends on people, institutions, and stability. Remove those, and even the greatest achievements can dissolve into silence. The vanished knowledge of ancient civilizations is not just a historical curiosity. It is a reminder. What humanity once knew is not the same as what humanity remembers, and what we forget may have shaped the world far more than we realize. Knowledge, no matter how advanced, does not survive on brilliance alone. It survives through continuity, through teachers and students, institutions and stability, generation after generation. When that chain is broken, even the most sophisticated science can vanish, as if it never existed. Across history, we see moments where civilizations reached remarkable heights of understanding, only to lose it within a few generations. This was not because the knowledge was flawed, but because the world that sustained it collapsed. Ancient science was fragile. It lived in workshops, temples, courts, and small circles of specialists. Astronomers memorized the skies. Engineers passed techniques by demonstration, not diagrams. Metallurgists guarded their methods as secrets. When cities fell, these living libraries disappeared with them. War was often the first fracture. Conquest scattered scholars, destroyed schools, and ended patronage. Without support, learning became a luxury few could afford. Survival replaced study. Fields went untended, trade routes closed, and the focus shifted from innovation to endurance. Disease was just as devastating. Plagues did not only kill populations, they erased memory. When entire generations were lost, so were the links between past and future. Children grew up without mentors. Apprentices never finished their training. Knowledge that required years of guidance simply stopped being taught. Even when texts survived, understanding did not always follow. A manuscript can preserve symbols but not context. Equations without explanation become riddles. Diagrams without instruction turn into art. Later cultures inherited fragments they could not fully interpret, mistaking advanced science for myth, magic, or superstition. This is how regression happens, not as a sudden fall, but as a quiet forgetting. The Roman world offers a powerful example. After its collapse, large-scale engineering faded across Europe. Roads decayed. Concrete recipes were lost. Mechanical devices vanished from common use. It would take more than 1,000 years for certain technologies to reappear, rediscovered rather than inherited. Progress, we assume, is a straight line. But history shows it is a series of climbs and collapses. Knowledge does not automatically move forward. It must be carried. When learning depends on fragile systems, empires, elites, centralized institutions, it risks disappearing when those systems fail. Science without survival is temporary. Intelligence without continuity is silent. The most unsettling realization is this: advanced knowledge may have existed many times before, only to be lost again and again. Not because humanity was incapable of preserving it, but because history rarely allows ideal conditions to last. What we call primitive eras may not reflect a lack of intelligence, but the aftermath of forgetting. And every broken chain of learning reminds us that progress is not guaranteed. It is earned, protected, and, if neglected, easily erased. War does more than destroy cities. It destroys memory. When conflict erupts, innovation is rarely the first casualty, but it is among the most permanent. Laboratories become ruins. Workshops fall silent. Libraries burn, not because knowledge is targeted, but because survival becomes the only priority that remains. Throughout history, some of humanity's greatest advances have vanished in the aftermath of war. Not defeated by better ideas, but by chaos. Ancient science depended on stability. Engineers required resources. Astronomers needed years of observation. Metallurgists relied on trade networks to access rare materials. When those systems collapsed, innovation had nowhere to live. Invasions often erased more than governments. They shattered educational traditions. Conquering powers dismantled institutions tied to the old order, unintentionally severing the transmission of specialized knowledge. Skilled artisans were killed, enslaved, or scattered. Their techniques, never written down, disappeared with them. The fall of civilizations is rarely a single event. It is a cascade. War leads to famine. Famine weakens societies. Disease follows. Each layer strips away another piece of cultural memory. By the time peace returns, the world that once supported advanced science no longer exists. Consider the ancient centers of learning: Alexandria, Baghdad, Nalanda. These were not just libraries. They were living ecosystems of scholars, translators, and thinkers. When they fell to war and political upheaval, entire fields of study collapsed overnight. Texts were lost, yes, but more devastating was the loss of discussion, debate, and interpretation. Without those voices, knowledge became inert. In many cases, conquerors inherited technologies they did not fully understand. Roads were used until they crumbled. Machines were admired, then abandoned. Techniques became rituals, then legends. As for what was once engineering slowly transformed into myth. Collapse also changes values. A society under threat does not invest in curiosity. It invests in defense. Long-term innovation gives way to immediate necessity. Even when peace returns, generations may pass before learning is rebuilt. This is why progress leaves gaps. Between ancient breakthroughs and modern rediscoveries lie centuries of silence. Not because humanity forgot how to think, but because war made thinking a risk few could afford. The uncomfortable truth is that science is not indestructible. It is vulnerable to the same forces that topple empires. When societies fall, their knowledge often falls with them, buried beneath ash and rubble, waiting for a future that may never come. History remembers victories. It forgets what was lost. And in the shadows of collapsed civilizations, we are left to wonder how much human brilliance vanished, not because it failed, but because war gave it no chance to survive. We often imagine history as a straight line, an unbroken march forward from stone tools to silicon chips, from fire to electricity, from ignorance to enlightenment. But the deeper we look into the past, the more that comforting illusion begins to fracture. Progress, it turns out, is not guaranteed. It is fragile. And history is filled with moments when humanity did not advance, but forgot. Technological knowledge does not exist on its own. It lives inside people, institutions, languages, and cultures. When those systems are stable, knowledge accumulates. But when they fracture, through war, famine, climate change, or collapse, what was once understood can vanish with shocking speed. A single generation is sometimes all it takes. We see this pattern again and again. The Romans mastered concrete that could harden underwater and last for millennia, yet the formula disappeared after the fall of the empire. Ancient engineers built roads, aqueducts, and machines of remarkable sophistication. But when centralized authority collapsed, so did the knowledge required to maintain them. Progress stalled, not because people became less intelligent, but because the systems that preserved knowledge fell apart. Even writing itself offers no guarantee. Libraries burn, archives decay, languages die. When knowledge is not continuously taught, practiced, and valued, it becomes inert, symbols without meaning. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria was not a single catastrophic event, but a slow erosion, reminding us that forgetting is often gradual, quiet, and irreversible. Archaeology reveals how thin the line really is. At abandoned sites around the world, we find tools no one remembers how to use, structures no one remembers how to build, and technologies whose purposes we still debate. These are not signs of primitive minds, but of broken continuity. Chains of learning snapped by forces beyond human control. And this is perhaps the most unsettling lesson of all. Advanced knowledge does not automatically protect a civilization. In some cases, it makes societies more vulnerable, dependent on complex systems that can fail under stress. When trade routes collapse, when specialists disappear, when materials become scarce, even sophisticated technologies can become useless overnight. Progress, then, is not a permanent achievement. It is a condition, one that must be constantly maintained. Lose the teachers, the builders, the engineers, the storytellers, and progress does not pause. It reverses. The ruins scattered across the world are not just monuments to greatness, they are warnings. They tell us that humanity has reached high levels of understanding before and lost them. That knowledge, no matter how advanced, is only as durable as the civilization that carries it forward. History does not promise us an upward path. It offers us a choice. Remember, preserve, and adapt, or risk becoming another chapter in the long story of what was once known and quietly forgotten. When the dust settles and the evidence is laid out, machines that should not exist, stones shaped beyond expectation, materials engineered to last longer than their makers, one question lingers in the silence that follows. What else did humanity once know? History, as we inherit it, is incomplete. It is a survival story told by fragments, what endured long enough to be written down, preserved, or rediscovered. But for every inscription that survives, countless others have vanished. For every artifact recovered, thousands more remain buried, eroded, melted into the soil of time. The past we see is not the full past. It is what remains after loss. We know that civilizations can rise to remarkable heights. We also know they can fall, suddenly, violently, or quietly. When they do, knowledge does not always pass forward. It fractures, it scatters. Sometimes it disappears entirely. Technologies that once functioned become mysteries. Skills once mastered become legends. Achievements once routine are later seen as impossible. This forces us to confront an uncomfortable idea. Human history may not be a simple story of steady progress, but a series of peaks and collapses, moments of brilliance followed by long periods of forgetting. If that is true, then the technologies we find today may not be isolated anomalies, but echoes of earlier understandings we no longer possess. Ancient engineers may have known principles we are only beginning to rediscover. Ancient builders may have understood materials, forces, or methods that left no written explanation behind. And ancient thinkers may have mapped the heavens, measured the earth, and tracked time with a precision we once believed impossible for their age. But certainty remains elusive. Archaeology works with absence as much as presence. For every answer uncovered, new questions emerge. Was lost knowledge local or global? Was it rare or widespread? Did it vanish gradually, or in a single catastrophic moment? And how much of it is still hidden beneath forests, oceans, and ice? What makes these questions so powerful is not the promise of sensational conclusions, but the humility they demand. They remind us that modern civilization is not the end point of history. It is simply the current chapter, and like those before us, we are not immune to forgetting. The ruins of the past are not accusations. They are invitations to look deeper, to question assumptions, and to accept that the human story is more complex than timelines suggest. Somewhere between myth and science, between memory and stone, lies a version of our past we have yet to fully understand. And perhaps that is where the true mystery lives, not in claiming what once was, but in asking what may still be waiting to be found. Because the greatest discovery may not be proof of lost civilizations or forgotten machines, but the realization that human knowledge has always been more fragile, more cyclical, and more mysterious than we ever imagined. As we reach the end of this journey, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The past is far less simple than we were taught. Across continents and centuries, ancient machines, impossible stonework, and lost sciences whisper the same message. Human knowledge is not a straight line forward, but a fragile cycle of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. What we call advanced today may have existed before, and vanished without a trace. These ruins are not just relics of ancient brilliance, they are warnings. They remind us that progress can be forgotten, knowledge can be erased, and even the greatest civilizations can fade into silence. So the next time you hear that something was impossible for the ancient world, remember this. History only tells us what survived, not everything that once existed. If this journey changed how you see the past, like the video, share it with someone who loves mysteries and subscribe to Mysteries of Earth for more forgotten truths hidden beneath time.